What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show, and today we're doing something a little bit different. If you saw the most recent KTM news video and you watched it all the way to the end, you already know what we're doing. And today we're taking a look at some of the more random news stories that have gone on in the motorcycling space, because I can't catch everything and not everything deserves its own big-ass video. So today we're taking a look at a handful of smaller subjects and giving you guys just a better idea of what's going on in the background in the industry. This video is powered by Flying Eyes. Whether I'm riding on-road or off, they're my choice of sunglasses thanks to their thin and flexible stems, so I can ride for hours with no pressure points. Click that link down in the description below and use the code SC10 for 10% off your order. Now I'm going to try to keep this one a little bit on the shorter side today because we've only got 3 news topics that I really wanted to dive into. And the first thing is that Honda now has trademarks for a CBR 400-4 and a CBR 500R4 as well. Now if you're anything like me, you immediately thought that we were going to see another small bore inline 4 here in the United States, which, you know, I'm not a huge proponent of that idea. A lot of people seem to really enjoy the ZX4R and RR, even though I hear that they're limited here in the States to like 56 horsepower because of noise regulations and stuff like that. Which, I mean, could you make a slower motorcycle? But again, I'm in the minority here. A lot of people are super excited about these little bikes because they get the feeling that they can rev them out really far on the street, when the way that I see it, you can say the same thing about a normal 600, but that's besides the point. Now the question is, why do we have a 400 and a 500? In Japan, there is an entire licensing class for below 400 cc's, so I would expect the 400 to be just segmented to the Japanese market or other Asian markets like that. And then the 500 is probably what we're going to see worldwide. And you can probably assume that the 500 is going to be tuned a little bit lower than something like the ZX4RR so that you can get away with less noise out of the motor. So it might not zing quite as high. Another option though that I think would be really cool to see with this motorcycle, and I have wanted to see this bike in the United States forever. As soon as I found out that this thing was available in Australia, I was like, I need to buy a plane ticket to Australia now. But there is a bike called the Honda Super 4, and there's a version of it, I think they call it the Sirioro. It's not the Sirioro. I don't know exactly what it is. I'll have it on the screen. But it's basically a red, white, and blue HRC colorway version of a little inline 400cc motorcycle that has VTEC on there. Now Honda really hasn't brought a lot of VTEC motorcycles to the United States. The last one that I can think of off the top of my head is the Interceptor, and that one is actually really cool. I used to own an Interceptor, and the exhaust sound that you got between, I think it was like 55-ish, 100 RPM, where it switched from 2 valves to 4, it's massive, and you can actually feel a pretty significant difference in the power band. It really feels like there's 2 different curves going on. I'll have a picture of it over here, but you can see there's this one curve and then a little like jagged line where VTEC is kicking on, and then it accelerates even harder. I think that would actually be a really good way to get around the noise limitations, because if you're only using 2 valves per cylinder down low, you could functionally detune the motor, and then you activate the second set of valves per cylinder over a certain RPM, and then you're getting full power. And let's be real, if you're gonna be riding one of those motorcycles here in the United States, you're always gonna be in the VTEC power band, so there's not really, you don't have to worry too much about the detuned part of the power band. When are we likely to see one of these motorcycles? Probably we're not gonna hear about it again until like EICMA of 2025. I would expect even then, if we hear about it, we're gonna see concept images. They've just filed for the trademark. I don't know how far down the line they actually are in production. If we're gonna see one on the road, it's not gonna be till I think the end of 2026. But let's talk about a motorcycle that we are probably going to see in the soon, and that is CFMOTO's new 750cc inline 4 motorcycle. A lot of inline 4 news coming out lately, and this is an interesting one because when you think about the 750 to 800cc range, right now that is entirely dominated by parallel twins. You've got just a plethora of 700 to 900cc parallel twins, and even bigger now, that are just the dominant force in that sort of middle displacement range. The only other inline 4 to my mind is the Suzuki. You've got the GSX-R 750 and the GSX-S. It really is a defunct class because ever since they got rid of the 750cc racing class, there was no point to continue making it. But Suzuki is the one company so content to sit on its laurels that they're like, this is one of the winningest motorcycles we've ever made. Let's just keep making it. People will still buy it. And for reference, that Suzuki is making 148 horsepower and 64 foot-pounds of torque. And because CFMOTO is actually really good at placing their motorcycles competitively in the power band, I would expect to see this motorcycle making roughly that same kind of power, while also coming in at cheaper than the Suzuki with more technology, because that's kind of CFMOTO's deal. This isn't their first at bat with an inline 4cc motorcycle. They've made a bike called the Voom 500 that we talked about many moons ago at this point. And that one, I believe, is China only. They're not bringing it to other markets. But you can expect that this one's got probably similar architecture. I mean, why redesign the whole thing? Just hit it with the enlarging ray and just make it bigger. The cool thing about this one though is it's going to split the difference between their 675cc triple and the 1000cc V4 superbike that they're coming out with. And I think it's interesting that they're not doing the 400, 600, 1000. They're doing 675, 750, 1000. All of the displacement has really grown. And yes, you can get smaller displacement bikes from CFMOTO, but I think they're acknowledging that people who are getting into this segment of motorcycling, they're not super interested in something sub 600 cc's. So you've got the 675 that is probably going to be very nice and torquey with a broad power band, but not revving nearly as high. Then you've got that like pure super sport energy coming from the 750, and then, you know, your balls to the wall V4 horsepower that you're going to get out of a 1000. It'll be interesting to see where that one lands, because that V4 1000cc land is super competitive between the Aprilia and the Ducati, and not to mention all of the other inline 4 1000cc bikes out there. If there is a company that can handle releasing a new and unproven motorcycle in this market segment, it is CFMOTO. But man, do they have to come correct. That is the most competitive market segment you could imagine. Imagine trying to make a motorcycle that's brand new compete with the likes of the R1 or the CBR 1000 RR. That is a massively tall order. And then we're gonna wrap this one up with something that I think is just really funny. Usually I'm a little bit more apprehensive to say that the Chinese motorcycles are rip-offs or that they're just copying what other manufacturers are doing, because they're really not. What they're doing is they're licensing motors, or they're developing motors. You know, they've licensed the Kawasaki 650. There's a ton of Chinese motorcycles that are using that motor. And then you've got CFMOTO with the 750 or the 790. But this one is just a shameless ripoff. There's a company called Great Wall Motors, which I have never heard of to this point. And they've got a sub-brand that is SOUO, Suo, no idea. And they've got a line of like Grand American style tourers, which I believe are only available in China or in Asia. And when I say Grand American, I'm talking Grand American, because these are gigantic 2000cc flat 8-cylinder motorcycles. I don't even think Harley has a motorcycle that big. Let me do a Google. What's the biggest one that they've got? I think it's the 117. 17 CI2 cc's. 117 cubes is 1917 cubic centimeters. But what's the 121? Or I think 122? 1900 cc's on the nose. So the 122 is the same size. So this company is going toe-to-toe with Harley-Davidson in terms of displacement, but this is the only bike aside from like the Tomahawk and the Boss Hoss that has an 8-cylinder, I believe. But anyway, these are just straight rip-offs, and they don't even have the decency to make themselves look good. I mean, if you look at their S2000 GL, which literally has GL in the title, I mean, that is very on the nose. It looks like a Goldwing had sex with a BMW and just, you know, drank all the way through pregnancy. This thing is rough bubbles. It kind of looks like if you asked an AI to design a touring motorcycle. But the actual motorcycle we're talking about here today is a one-for-one knockoff of the Rune. It is the only thing I can see different between this is it doesn't have the long scoopy fender that goes all the way down to the bottom of the wheel. It's got a fender that kind of looks like the old V-Rod fender, but everything else, even down to the way that the exhaust pipe is shaped, is shamelessly ripping off the Rune. This is going to be the closest that a lot of people are going to get to riding a Rune because they're so rare and they're so hard to get a hold of and they're so expensive. These things apparently are roughly 30,000 to 40,000, the equivalent in US dollars. So at the end of the day, for like a fully technologically laden motorcycle, you're looking at something that is fairly competitive price-wise. But again, just the shamelessness of this ripoff boggles my mind. And as a result, we're very likely to not see it outside of China. I would imagine that this is home country only, because if they tried to sell this in the United States, I can't even support this kind of bullshit. And I'm usually here being like, well, look, these Chinese companies, they actually have some good qualities. I don't even care that it's a 2000 cc flat 8. This is beyond defensible here. I've never ridden one of these motorcycles, so I'm not going to speak to it, and I never want to ride one because this is shameless. This is very rough. But let me know all your thoughts on all this down in the comments below. Next time, I'd like to also bring in some questions from y'all. So if you've got any questions, let me know down in the comments below. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.